everyone, welcome back to another video. This is part 2 of basic movements in Unity designed for absolute beginners. In my last video, I told you how to move your object using transform.Translate and taking input from user. If you are not familiar with those concepts, you can check a link in the description box and watch first that video so that this will be easy for you. Alright, moving to our current concepts. All right. As you know, when you play games, whenever you come in interaction with the walls and ground, your player detects collision. It doesn't pass through that. Let me just create a simple wall using a cube. I'm going to reset its transform. I'm going to bring it up above the plane. I'm going to set its height to 0.5 and x as well, and I'm going to increase its scale in z direction. Alright, let's consider it as a wall. I'm going to name it wall obstacle and give me some material to it so that we can easily detect it. I'm going to add black material to my wall obstacle. According to the rule, whenever I play a game, my player should detect collision with a wall. Let's see what happens. I think I should. Look, but my player is going through the wall. It's not stopping. Like my wall and player is not detecting collision. Physics is not involved inside it. Although my wall has collider and my player has attached collider to it, but still they are not detecting collision. Okay, there comes the shortcoming of the transform.Translate. Whenever we try to move our player using the transform.Translate, our player doesn't detect the collisions. Our player doesn't detect the collisions with the walls and with the plane and all that stuff. It can make you move through the walls. So the solution for this is we are going to move our player using the rigid body. In rigid body, you can move your player using the velocity, using the add force, and using the move position. I'm going to tell you two, velocity and add force, in this tutorial. Um, let's get deep dive into it. I'm going to add a rigid body component to my player inside the inspector. All right, I have added rigid body component to my player. Let's go back to the script. I have moved my player using transform.Translate. All right, I'm going to comment this out. As you know that commented code of pieces doesn't run inside your editor. Alright, I'm going to use private. As I'm using rigid body, the data type that will be used will be preferred rigid body. So I'm going to name my variable as my RB. Like, it's a good practice that if you keep the first word or inside your variable capital, this is called the camel case. So it's a very good practice. As I know, I have used the rigid body, but maybe my wall has rigid body attached to it as well. So how it's gonna detect like which rigid body I have to use? Maybe I have changed it. I have turned it down to the is kinematic. Although kinematic rigid body is something different. We are not going deep into it, but here the point is like how it's gonna detect which rigid body is. So I'm gonna tell you have to get the rigid body on which the script is applied. So it means it's gonna get the rigid body of player is equals to get component rigid body, and it's a function closing parenthesis. All right, I have pressed the control ST. Now you can use player using the let me tell you what the rigid body is. I think so you are not familiar with the rigid body concept right now. Okay, rigid body is something that you actually do to apply physics to your game objects. Like if I will hold my player up above in the air, like let me disable the rigid body for the right now. My player doesn't know like it has to come back to the ground. Look, uh, it has rigid body attached to it, so that's why it's coming back to the ground. Let me just remove it as well. Okay, I have uplifted my cube in the air, but according to the real life scenario, it should come to the ground back. Like if you jump, you come back to the ground, and your ground and your player should detect collision so that it doesn't move across the boundary of the plane. But this is not the case over here. Like to apply physics to our game object, physics, acceleration, gravity, and all that, you have to attach rigid body to your game objects. All right, I'm going to attach rigid body to my game object now. If I will add play, look, it's coming back. Very nice. Now it's affected by the physics forces like friction and acceleration and all that we will study later. But look, this is not has a rigid body attached to it, so it has some sort of a gap in between. If I will attach a rigid body to it as well, so this will also be affected by the physics forces and gravity will be affected. Look, both of them are falling. Very nice. All right, I have attached the physics, but let me tell you, for physics forces, your plane and your player both should have a collider component attached to it, because both of them should, and collider should not be checked to is trigger, because both of them should detect collision. Like if you will like smash your hand on the table, it's clearly detecting a collision between you and your between hand and table. All right, so if I will remove the uh, look, if I will remove the collider from my player, look what happens. This will not be able to detect collision. It's sinking down. My player and my plane is not detecting collision to each other, but that shouldn't be the case. I have explained the rigid body to you. All right, let's move our player using rigid body. I have attached the rigid body. Let me attach box collider again. I removed that just to make sure. The best example you can get is removing the box collider is like uh, you in think of in a real life scenario, like if you are standing on a marshland and there is no collision detected between you and the mud, so you will keep on sinking inside it because in play because there is no ground here that can detect collision. So that's the point you can get, like if you are standing on a marshland, you will keep on sinking inside it because no collision is being detected. Alright, so I'm going to move my player using a rigid body. So if you will look closely, I have declared the variable my RP for the rigid body data type. So whenever I'm dealing with the rigid body of my player inside the whole script, I'm going to use my RP. So I'm going to apply dot add force using the rigid body. So if you will look at if you will place cursor over here, you will look at it's asking for the two parameters. It's asking for the first parameter is the vector 3 in which axis you want to apply force, and the second is the force mode. As you know, we are applying our moving our player using the horizontal input inside the x direction. So I'm going to pass horizontal input multiply by speed inside the x-axis, and also I'm going to tell it in which direction it has to apply. So I'm going to multiply vector 3 dot right is used for x-axis. All right, and second parameter is asking for is the force mode dot impulse. In force mode dot impulse means like we have to apply force directly. There are some other force modes that we are not dealing right now. I will tell you later about that. So add force. Also, I'm going to apply, we are using the vertical input keys for moving our player in the Z direction. So I'm going to tell it the forward. Forward is a keyword for the Z axis. Uh, so I'm going to multiply my vertical input multiply by speed or force mod dot impulse dot impulse. I'm sorry, force mod dot impulse. Alright, I'm gonna press Ctrl S keys and I'm going back to my Unity editor, and now I will hit play. Now look, if I'm moving my player, it's also rotating as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna it's freeze its rotation inside X, Y, and Z direction. All right, let's play. All right. It's interacting with the as we know, like add force apply force according to the like mass of the object. So if I will increase its mass to like 30, let's look how. Look, now I'm pressing key but it's applying force very little. Let me just decrease its mass to almost 20. Not, I guess 10 15 will be fine. Alright, let's look how our player behaves now. Look, but look, now it's interacting with the physics wall. But look, if I am moving my player is not stopping whenever I stop pressing the key. This is because add force moves the objects according to the mass of the object. According to the mass of the object, like let me give you the real world example of this. Whenever you are driving your car, whenever you apply brakes, your car doesn't come to rest at the same time. It accelerates, like it stops after some time, it decreases its speed. That's how the add force work. Like if you are dealing with the uh, cars inside your game, you are going to use add force to it. Like whenever you want to create a realistic move inside your game, you are gonna use my rigidbody dot add force. All right, like when we will create our maze game series, we are going to move our sphere. We want the realistic move over there, so we will use add force component. All right, now I'm going to comment it out, and now I'm going to move my player using velocity. Velocity is something that moves your player according at a constant speed. It doesn't care for the mass, or no acceleration is being produced. So I'm going to look closely. Add force is a function that asks for two parameters. First, velocity 3 is asking for us to declare a new vector 3 position. All right, I'm going to give in x-axis we are using moving using our horizontal input, so I'm gonna move. Let's look at, there comes a little concept over here. We move our player inside the y-axis whenever we are creating jumps. In this tutorial I'm not creating jump, so I don't want to change the y direction velocity. So what I'm gonna write over here is dot velocity dot y. This is telling my vector 3 component that keep the velocity as it is. There is no need to change. All right, and I'm going to pass vertical input multiply by speed inside the z component. Now press Ctrl S keys and get back to your Unity editor. Now I have come back to my Unity editor. Now I'm going to hit play. Look, it's moving at a constant speed now. It's not creating any like I press key, it moves, and whenever I release the key, it stops at the same instant. It means it's not creating any some sort of the acceleration, and it's not mass dependent. It also interacting with the physics objects as well. And also it is itself affected by the gravity because it has rigid body component attached to it. But add force was giving us the feeling like my player is moving at some sort of a slippery surface. But for this scenario, my rb dot velocity is the best case to move my player. There is one more component at my rb.move position. It works as same as it is as the transform.Translate. You can look at the unity official documentation for that. uh, but there comes a little bit twist over there because my rb.move position gonna interact with the physics object, gonna detect collision as well, but transform.Translate that doesn't. So that's it for today's video. We looked at how transform.Translate was creating trouble for us because it was not detecting collision with the walls and etc. I explained you some sort of the basics of the rigid body. Also, I told you how can you move your object using the RigidBody.AddForce and RigidBody.Velocity. That's it for today's video. Stay tuned for the next video. Until then, keep growing, keep learning. Thank you.